Okay, Greek class, this is a lecture on the perfect and the pluperfect. These are the last tenses that you're going to learn. So recall what you've learned so far. You've learned the present tense, you've learned the imperfect tense, you've learned the future tense, and you've learned the aorist tense. This is the perfect tense. And the pluperfect. The pluperfect is less frequent. The perfect is far more of the two, the far more frequently occurring tense. So this lecture is going to talk about what the perfect tense means, and it's also going to talk about the form and the morphology of the perfect tense. So I want to begin by talking about the most common meanings of the perfect tense. So the first and probably the most frequent meaning of the perfect tense in the Greek New Testament is a past action with a resulting state. So think of it this way, an action that's occurred, but its effects are ongoing. Okay? So, for instance, uses a form of grapho, and this is what it looks like, graptai. It is written, or it has been written. So, this little formulation stresses that Scripture was written in a past time, but it has ongoing impact and results. It is written. It still is written. It has been written in the past, but it still is written. That is, it's still relevant, and it has impact in the present. A related nuance is past action with ongoing relevance. And this is different in the sense that oftentimes a writer will use a perfect tense to describe a past event to stress that for his or her argument it has ongoing relevance. Okay, so an example that I provide in the handout is 1 John chapter 1 verses 1 to 3, where the writer is describing the past action of Jesus' incarnation and his encounter with Jesus in the flesh. While the incarnation has ongoing results, one could argue that, but for the sake of his argument here, he's stressing that this past action has an ongoing relevance for the point he's making. And the point he's making is this, that the incarnation of Christ and the apostles' encounter with Jesus in past time impacts the apostolic proclamation, has relevance for the apostolic proclamation in the present. So that's his argument in 1 John 1 verses 1 to 3. And finally, you can have a past action with a holistic perspective. And this is almost approaching the meaning of the aorist. So it's a completed past action, and there's no kind of nuance as to its resulting state or ongoing relevance. So an example that I put in the handout is from Revelation 8:5, where the writer uses a perfect tense to describe the action of an angel in heaven who took a censer, that is a little container, and filled it with fire from the altar and threw it down to the earth. The perfect tense is used there, but the nuance is more like an aorist. It's just stressing the completed act that from a holistic perspective. It's not implying that this act had a resulting state that is ongoing. By and large, the key nuance is this first one, past action with a resulting state. So depending on the context, you could translate it, something has happened or something is. That's the past action, and that's stressing resulting state. Both nuances are there, and depending on the context, one may be stressed over the other. So that's the meaning of the perfect tense. Here's the paradigm for the perfect active indicative, and I'm using luo as our paradigm verb. So let's walk through the forms. The first singular, le luca. Second singular, le lucas. Third singular, le lucen. First plural, le lucamen. Second plural, le lucata. And third plural, le lucasen or le lucan. Okay, what do you notice here? You notice luo. You can see luo here, so the verb stem is still there. But what you see is something on the front of it. So what do you notice? The first letter of the verb is replicated, and between the two letters is an epsilon. This is called reduplication, and that is one of the markers for the perfect tense. Another thing that you're seeing here is a kappa alpha. That's the tense formative for the verb, the perfect tense. And you see it repeated throughout the paradigm. Okay? So, le luca, and this is a zero ending, so there's no ending put on. Le lucas, a sigma. Le lucen, what happens here is the alpha shifts to an epsilon, and you get a movable nu on the end. Le lucamen, the men, just like the first plural that we've seen in the present tense. Le lucata, tau epsilon. And le lucasin, similar to the third plural that we see within the present tense. And this is an alternative ending that occurs every once in a while. This is the paradigm for the perfect middle and passive indicative. And what you should note here is that the middle and the passive have the same form, just like what we saw in the present tense and the imperfect. The middle and the passive are the same. When we move to the future and the aorists, they had two different forms for the middle and the passive. So we're back to just learning one form for the middle and the passive. And we're using luo again. And what do you note here? There's reduplication, but there's no tense formative used here. Just the stem and the middle passive endings. Le lu mai, le lu sai, le lu tai, le lumatha, le lusta, le luntai. Now, you look at this and you think back to your middle and passive endings of the present tense, and you remember that they were like that. Well, there's a reason for that, right? So let's go back to the present. It's lu, psi. Okay, lu, psi. Intervocalic sigma drops. Epsilon and alpha become an eta, and the iota subscripts. So that's what happens there in the present tense form. But when you get to the perfect tense, there's no connecting vowel here. It's just reduplication, verb stem, and the ending. So the true ending for the middle and the passive form shows up. Le lumai, le lusai, le lutai, le lumatha, le lutha, le luntai. And I've given the passive meaning here. The middle would probably be I have loosed for myself or myself. And also note middle only verbs that are middle only in the perfect tense. We'll use this as their form. So let's not talk now a little bit about the morphology of the perfect active, the parts breakdown. So what are the key components of the perfect active form? Well, you get reduplication, the verb stem, the tense formative, and the personal endings. So this is the first plural form. So le, lu, kamen. Le, lu, kamen. We have loosed. We have loosed. So reduplication and the tense formative are things to note. The personal endings are really endings that you've seen before. So there's really nothing new there. So this is a different chart showing the morphology with a little bit more detail. We see reduplication, we see the verb stem, we see the tense formative, and this notes the endings. So the first singular has a 0 ending. We have a sigma, we have a 0 ending, but remember, the alpha here shifts to an epsilon, and you get the movable nu. That's the one difference that you got to note. Leilu ka men, leilu kata, leilu ka sin. Okay, these are all endings that you recognize, right? Usin, luo, lues, lue, luamen, lueta, luusin. Here's a chart summarizing the morphology of the perfect middle and the passive. So there's reduplication and the verb stem, but no tense formative, just the personal endings. Le, lu, mai. I have been loosed. So here is a bigger chart showing you the full paradigm and what it looks like and the endings. Almost like what I've showed you before, stressing reduplication, the stem, and the personal endings, mai, sai, tai, matha, sta, and ntai. So what we've learned about so far is what we would call consonant reduplication. Here we have what's called vocalic reduplication. And true to its form, vocalic reduplication occurs with verbs that begin with vowels. Okay? So for instance, in verbs that begin with a vowel, the initial vowel is lengthened. So agapao in a perfect is agapeka. Agapeka. And notice, look at this, the contract vowel lengthens prior to the tense formative, and that alpha lengthens. Agapeka, that's the perfect. I have loved. Verbs that begin with a diphthong, the first vowel of the diphthong lengthens, but if the second vowel is in the diphthong, is in the iota, then it subscripts. So aiteo, I ask, is ateka. Ateka. Alpha lengthens, iota subscripts. It's a contract vowel, so lengthening, and kappa, alpha, tense formative. Akuo is a little bit different in that it reduplicates the first two letters of the verb form. So you get ku, and you get the alpha lengthens, and you get ko-a, a-ke ko-a. And then you get verbs that begin with double consonants, like gnosko. Okay, its verb form is gno. That's its true stem. You get a double consonant, and it does vocalic. So epsilon, gamma, nu, omega, agnoka. There's also what's called aspirant reduplication. So and the key word here is aspirant. So think of verbs that begin with an aspirant letter. That is a letter that contains an H sound. So theta is a TH sound. Phi is a PH sound. And chi is a CH sound. So each one of those have an H in it. And so when it reduplicates, the letter that goes in front deaspirates. So how would you deaspirate a theta? You'd move to a tau. How would you move it to a tau? How would you deaspirate a phi? You'd move to the P sound, the P. How would you deaspirate a chi? You'd deaspirate to a kappa, just a simple K sound. So that's what happens. So therapuo, I heal, is te therapumai. I have been healed. Phanerao is pe phaneromai. Okay? And charizomai is ke charisma. Okay, we're moving on to talk about the reduplication that occurs on compound verbs. And remember, compound verbs are verbs that have a prepositional prefix. And for these verbs, reduplication occurs after the prepositional prefix and before the stem. I've got a few examples here. For instance, apoluo, which means to release or to divorce, is reduplicated not at the front of the verb here, but after the prepositional prefix and before the verb stem. So, apolelusai. Okay, this is an example of a middle passive form in the second singular. And then katapaino. Remember a couple things here. So we get the preposition, the prepositional prefix, the reduplication, ba-be. Remember, bino undergoes really unusual stem changes between its present tense and other tenses. And we saw this kind of with the aorist tense, right? The second aorist form, babeka. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about some irregular forms of the perfect tense, which are called second perfects in brackets. Okay. And second perfects, not because, every second aorist forms a second perfect, but these are second perfects in that they stray a little bit away from the typical way that a perfect tense is formed, primarily because the kappa alpha tenseformative is not used, only the alpha bit of it. So genomai becomes gegona. And remember, the root of genomai is gen. So we see that there. We see reduplication, gen, but with this form, the epsilon lengthens to an omicron. That's why you get gegona. Grapho is very easy. Reduplication, graph, and just the alpha of the tenseformative. This guy, this form of erkomai is a bit tricky to explain. You get reduplication and vocalic reduplication. So the actual root is loose. That's the actual root of erkomai, the put in root for the aorist and the perfect. So you get reduplication, L, and you get that epsilon kind of lengthen, and the U just simplifies to an upsilon, the theta and the alpha. So that's what's happening there with that root. So erkomai, again, has a root from another verb, filling in for it in the aorist form, but also the perfect form. Lambano is a bit of a tricky one. Remember, lab is its true root. We see that in the second aorist, elabon. So we get vocalic reduplication here, except it's epsilon iota. We get lambda, and that alpha in the lab lengthens to an eta, and the beta changes to a phi, and then you get the ending, the tense form. Bit different, hard to kind of go back to lab, but that's how it happens. And this last one is straightforward, except you see poith there. Here we have the epsilon iota lengthened to an omicron iota, and that explains that internal change there. But there are other verbs that have irregularities in their perfect tenses. Remember, anababeka, so we get reduplication, but we see this stem there. And the true stem of bino is ba, but in every tense, it lengthens to a bay. So ana, prefix, reduplication, verb stem, tense form of anababeka. This is heurisco. It doesn't undergo reduplication, vocalic reduplication, and that's in keeping with heurisco. It doesn't augment in the aorist tense either. So its root though is hur, and hur inserts an eta between the verb stem and the tense formative. Hureka. And finally, lego is an extremely complex verb. We saw that it uses another stem in the aorist, apon. Its stem is kind of ip, digamma probably, fip. And its stem here is epsilon rho, and again, probably digamma. So this is in keeping. The epsilon comes in before the digamma. The digamma is gone. You get two epsilons coming together to create epsilon iota. You get a rho, and just like up here, it inserts an eta prior to the tense formative. It's a areka. I have seen. So those are some unusual perfects that you're going to see. Other irregularities occur because you have verbs that end in dentals. Verbs that end in tau, delta, theta, or zeta will drop these letters before adding the kappa, alpha tense formative. And the example here is engidzo, which is to come near. Here we have vocalic reduplication. It lengthens to an eta, enge-ka. So the zeta simply drops. Its true stem has a delta in it. So it is a dental, but with these idzo verbs, know that their true stem is something else. And in this case, it's a dental. Ending things off here in this lecture, I want to talk a little bit about the verb oida. Oida is another verb of knowing. So we know gnosko. This is oida. Now, oida is perfect in form, but present in translation. Okay, and it's a second perfect in the sense that you don't see the kappa, you just see the alpha on the end, and it's also unusual because we don't see vocalic reduplication here. It's just oida. So, but it has the same endings that we see with the perfect tense so far. And so for that reason, it's pretty easy. So this is a frequent verb of knowing in the Greek New Testament. You're going to see it. I've already known perfect form, present meaning. It's a second perfect, so it's just an alpha. No reduplication. In this case, they're arguing because it begins with a diphthong, but we saw other verbs that were diphthong and they reduplicated. This is just funny in that it's no reduplication. And it does, the other tense form that we're going to touch a little bit on is called the pluperfect. So the pluperfect form of oida acts like the aorist, like the past tense form of the verb. So here's the full paradigm for oida, which is the verb of knowing. And it looks just like perfect endings. So here we go. Oida, oidas, oiden, oidamen, oidata, oidasen. So here's the pluperfect form of oida. And this is another verb tense that you're going to learn, but it doesn't occur much, so you don't need to really memorize it, but just be able to recognize oida in its past tense form. A dane, a dace, a day, a daemon, a data, a daesan. This brings us, of course, to another tense called the pluperfect. So we've learned the perfect. The pluperfect then is related to the perfect, but a bit different. So conveys a meaning comparable to perfect tense. So completed action and continuing result. Unlike the perfect, the pluperfect describes a past state that was brought about by an action even further in the past. Well, before I get to that, I want to note this. It only occurs 86 times in the Greek New Testament, so it's not something you need to memorize. More FYI. That's what I would say. Now, their description of the perfect tense in the textbook was a little different than I have been accustomed to. So let me put it this way. I think there's a better way of explaining. Perfect tense is a past action that has ongoing results in the present, or at least our present may be the present of the writers. The pluperfect is a past action, and it had ongoing results, but they stopped at some point. The ongoing results stopped. So even the ongoing results are in the past. That's how I would define the difference between the perfect and the pluperfect, although perhaps that explanation was not exactly what the authors of the textbook kind of appreciated. I just find this explanation a bit clearer to me. I hope you do too. Let me show you the paradigm for the pluperfect. And we've seen this already. So what we're seeing here is reduplication. We see Mrs. Luo, we see a vocalic reduplication and a consonant reduplication. So an epsilon, a lambda, an epsilon, and the verb stem. So its form is a bit different that way. And we see different sets of endings. And epsilon iota nu, epsilon iota sigma, epsilon iota with a movable nu, epsilon iota men, epsilon iota tau epsilon, epsilon iota san. So the tense formative must be this. It must be kappa epsilon iota, and then you have your endings, right? Your nu, your sigma, your movable nu, your men, your tau epsilon, and your san. So that's the pluperfect, but remember, it only occurs 86 times in the Greek New Testament, and my guess would be that the pluperfect form of oida, I think it's a delta. Yeah, it's a delta. Would be the most prominent form of those occurrences in the Greek New Testament. All right, that's everything for the perfect tense and the pluperfect tense. So the good news is you have learned every verb tense that occurs in the indicative mood in the Greek New Testament. That's a big accomplishment that you have achieved. So continue to refresh yourself on these various verb tenses, because They will be the bread and butter of your reading the Greek New Testament as you move forward. Until next time, take care, and I'll see you in class.